In 3 short seconds, Lori Mitchell had determined that Marcus Ellington did not deserve to be here. Despite his exquisite suit and confident demeanor, all she could see was his skin. What she could not understand was the steadfast empire he had built and the undeniable power he wielded. When the announcement of the flight delay went out, no one realized that a call from him would shake the system. The crowd rushed, jostling each other through the vast areas of the airport. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed, blending into the tense atmosphere. But in the middle of that picture, there was a person walking calmly, as if everything around was just a faint shadow of a normal morning. Marcus Ellington, CEO of one of the leading companies, walked into gate D6. His dark blue suit fit his body, not too fussy but exuding the elegance of success. Yes, he didn't need a tie, because elegance was already part of his temperament, imbued in every gesture, every step. The shiny vintage watch on his wrist was a reminder of his past achievements. But Marcus was not a man who lived in the past. He lived in the present and the decisions that would change the future. His hands gently held a dark leather suitcase, forming a perfect curve, with the confident look of a man who never lacked composure. As he approached the counter, entering the priority area reserved for first-class passengers, his eyes swept over the people around him, none of whom were of concern to him at the moment. But then, a faint sound from behind made him stop. A woman's voice, as bland as a cold wind, spoke from the counter. "Sir, this is the first-class passenger area. Economy is over there." Lori Mitchell, the airport employee, stood in front of him, her cold eyes unable to hide her judgment, as if he was just a lost person who had accidentally entered the world of high-class people. She didn't need to check the ticket. She just looked Marcus up and down, her lips slightly curved as if she already knew the outcome. Marcus held out his e-ticket, but Lori didn't glance at him. She just smiled, a smile so fake you could feel the irony in it. She turned away, adding one more sentence casually, lowering her voice as if he were a minor glitch in her perfectly ordered system. "You must have misplaced it." Lori's voice was like a knife, each word carrying a layer of irony. And in that moment, Marcus realized that the problem wasn't the ticket, it wasn't the first-class section, it was him. His skin color, his presence here, in first class, was clearly a mistake. Marcus didn't reply, just a sharp look passed over her face. He could feel the contempt in her breath, an undisguised contempt served on a silver tray that was called first class. Not because of the ticket in his hand, but because of the way he looked, because he wasn't like them. But Marcus didn't protest. He just stood there, completely calm, waiting as if this were all just a small test, because he knew it was only just beginning. Marcus Ellington handed Lori Mitchell the e-ticket without saying a word. He kept his eyes steady, showing no emotion, only a cold calm. The clerk looked down at the screen, her eyes scanning his ticket absent-mindedly, as if she was used to checking these documents, even used to customers who did not belong here. Lori was in no hurry, showing no sign of ambiguity. She looked Marcus over again, this time from head to toe, and repeated the sentence in a soft yet discriminating tone. "That's highly suspicious, sir." Lori's mouth twitched, an unreadable smile crossing her face. She didn't rush to hand the tickets back to Marcus, but instead held them in her hand, looking at him as if something was wrong, something she couldn't quite place. The feeling in the air was heavy, as if she'd been expecting something different and hadn't gotten it. Marcus said nothing. His gaze was unhurried, though not rude. He understood that all these words, all these contemptuous questions were scripted. The question was not, "Can I board?" but "Why are you here?" Marcus knew that this prejudice was not just a coincidence. It was a system, a long-standing system that had been built up over generations. And what he saw was not unconsciousness, but the way society taught us from birth. People like him did not belong here. Not no matter how powerful, successful, or wealthy. Lori still didn't look at him, just turned back to the screen, her face suddenly too casual. Her words weren't a question, but a statement, a familiar formula. "There's nothing wrong with your ticket, but I think you might have the wrong place." Marcus looked at her again, silently, and again, no immediate response. His silence seemed to struggle against her arrogant gaze, but it showed something else, unshakable patience. He had no need to protest. He was prepared to wait until the right moment came. All he wanted was one simple thing: to have his presence acknowledged, not just with a ticket, but with respect. But she didn't see it, and there was no reason for her to. She kept her eyes indifferent and softly said, "Economy class is over there, sir." The words were like a cold blanket that covered him. Not because he couldn't do anything, but because he knew all too well that this nonsense wasn't random. It was programmed, and he was used to dealing with unspoken prejudice. Marcus walked past silently, but deep down, he knew that nothing happened for free. Things like this, even if not said out loud, were something that others expected him to accept. But he was not someone who would accept it easily. This scene is not just a casual exchange about plane tickets. It is a hidden war, built on the prejudices that are ingrained in each of us as a society. There is no reason for someone like Marcus to suffer such discrimination. But as he continues to walk towards first class, his silence makes all the eyes around him sharper than ever. Marcus Ellington didn't turn to look at Lori, nor did he wait for her reaction. Instead, he smiled slightly and stepped aside, making room for the others to pass. He didn't show anger, nor did he protest loudly as others might have. Pointless arguments only wearied people and prolonged the hurt. Marcus knew better. He chose action. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the sleek black phone, his eyes scanning the screen calmly. There was no rush or anger, as if what he was experiencing was not a slap in the face, but a part of life he had prepared for. Marcus dialed the number slowly, then raised the phone to his ear. His voice rang out, calm, unwavering, as if he were talking to an old friend, not a rude airport employee. "Hey Nick," he began, his voice unhurried, but filled with quiet strength. "Yes, this is Marcus. Could you delay flight 293 for me?" "Thanks." His voice was soft, as if he were asking for something ordinary, nothing special. But that very calmness was what made it so powerful. Lori stood there, still, her eyes fixed on Marcus, her lips parting and closing. A nameless confusion flickered in her eyes. She couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Just a call, nothing loud, no threat, but it was like a clap of thunder in a clear sky. Marcus didn't need to shout to assert his authority. All it took was one call, one calm request, as if he were asking for something completely normal, and everything changed. Lori's gaze suddenly turned awkward. She had no idea that a man like Marcus could change the entire situation with such a simple sentence. A passerby glanced at the conversation, then quietly moved away when they noticed the strange atmosphere. Their glances were filled with shock, wondering if things had gone beyond the normal limits. But even they, the people around them, could not predict what would happen next. All Marcus had to do was not react the way people expected. He didn't have to scream. He didn't have to act frustrated. All it took was a phone call. That was the invisible power he possessed. Not because he could change everything with force alone, but because he understood that things change even when we don't act the way others think. And that call wasn't just a request to change a flight. It was a signal, an underground earthquake that no one saw coming, but was powerful enough to change the entire story. Marcus wasn't a bystander. He was the one who created this game. And people like Lori, no matter how hard they tried, couldn't stop it. A voice from the airport loudspeaker cut through the tension. "Flight 293 to San Francisco has been delayed indefinitely." The entire space around them suddenly fell silent for a few seconds, as if everyone was trying to process that information. But in just a moment, the silence vanished, replaced by a wave of discontent, like an uncontrollable wave. A businesswoman, her face strained from the long wait, slammed her Starbucks cup down, sending coffee splattered across the floor. She stared at the broken cup, her eyes burning with anger. "It definitely wasn't me," she muttered, but her voice lacked the usual patience. Nearby, an old man with white hair could not contain his anger and shouted, "Are they kidding me? This is first class." His voice was filled with anger and surprise. The people around could not help but turn to look, witnessing the dissatisfaction of a man who once thought that the preferential treatment of first-class seats could bring perfect service. But now, all he received was utter disappointment. The chaos became more intense when a child, eyes red and swollen, began to sob. He did not understand why the flight had been delayed, only that the trip to see his mother would not be possible. Tears streamed down his face, and his heart was filled with unspoken sadness. The airport staff, already confused, became even more confused. The walkie-talkies emitted strange, intermittent, chaotic noises. Staff members shuffled through papers, made repeated phone calls, but no one could provide any precise information about what was happening. Everything became a blur. No one understood why, and it even felt like the whole system was starting to fall apart, piece by piece. The chaos didn't stop with the passengers. It spread, like a tidal wave that shattered everything that had seemed stable. People began to look at each other, wondering if they were part of an unfair game they didn't know about. Angry eyes and groans filled the air. A sense of unease permeated the airport. Things were spiraling out of control, and in the midst of it all, Marcus Ellington stood still, his eyes fixed on his phone. He didn't rush around, didn't feel the need to explain. While the crowd erupted into chaos, Marcus stood still, unaffected by the waves crashing around him. He had taken it all into his own hands. And when the system began to break down, people would realize that people like Marcus didn't have to do much. They just had to stand still and wait. Lori stood frozen, her hands shaking as she stammered, trying to take back the words she had let slip. "I didn't mean to. I just thought." She couldn't find any way to justify herself, only able to repeat those meaningless words reflexively. Her panicked eyes didn't dare look directly at Marcus, who stood still like a solid rock, untouched by the storm of emotions that had just occurred. Marcus, without haste, nor need to respond with anger. He just smiled slightly, his eyes still calm and profound, as if he had seen through everything. He nodded slightly, and then his voice, deep and clear, unhurried but full of weight, rang out in the cold air of the airport. "Don't worry. Just remember, the next time you judge someone by their appearance, ask yourself if you are qualified to judge them." His words were not harsh sarcasm, nor were they harsh sarcasm. They were simply a reminder, a gentle but effective wound. A quiet but sharp sentence, stabbing deep into the listener's mind, making Lori unable to escape the feeling of being exposed. All her arrogance suddenly seemed to shatter in an instant, leaving only an awkward silence that could not be concealed. Lori stood there, speechless, her eyes following Marcus as he walked past her. No apology, no further explanation, just a steady gaze, a steady step, and a quiet triumph. Marcus didn't need to do anything more. His words had done it all. Lori, in that moment, realized she wasn't just facing a man but someone who would never be defeated by the prejudices of this world. She stood still, eyes blurred with hindsight, as if the truth had already dawned on her. But now, she was the one facing herself. Marcus's footsteps faded from view, leaving the airport corridor in silence. The glass doors reflected the morning light, pale yellow rays shining through, creating a halo of light in the distance. Lori stood still, her eyes following him until his figure disappeared completely. The dim morning light did nothing to dispel the heaviness that had built up in her chest. She turned back to her computer screen, where the words CEO of Skyreach Aviation, Marcus Ellington, were clearly displayed, a sign of undeniable truth. The employee next to her, who had always been calm in every situation, was panting, his face pale. Lori said nothing. She swallowed, an unconscious movement to calm herself. But her fingers hit the wrong key twice, lighting up an unnecessary message. Confusion washed over her. She knew that what had just happened was more than just a simple work incident. Something much bigger had shattered right before her eyes, and now it had become a scar she could never erase. The music swelled, the sound like a rolling wave, gentle then strong. A quiet space in the first-class cabin. The last scene was Marcus Ellington, the man leaning back in the leather chair, eyes closed, relaxed. Everything around him was silent, as if nothing had happened. The whole big wave just now only a little echo in the mind. The echoes of that moment did not stop at the sight of a man relaxing in first class. It reverberated, smoldering in the hearts of every witness, including those involved. Because in that silence, in that serenity, was a great lesson about invisible power. Power does not need to scream or be violent. Power is built from silence, from a look, and from standing firm amid the waves. And then the echoes of this story will forever remain in Lori's heart, in the heart of every airport employee, in the heart of every witness. It will remind them, in a world where prejudice can be programmed from the moment we are born, we are the ones who can change it. Sometimes, we don't need to respond to rude words with violence or heavy resistance, but just be quiet, just stand firm, and just show them where real power comes from. So, let's ask ourselves, when will we wake up to the prejudices we unwittingly nurture? When will we understand that strength lies not in noisy battles, but in powerful silence? Let's try to change our perspective. Try to look at the people around us and ask ourselves, can we see them beyond the shell that society has placed on them? Ultimately, when each of us does not just stay silent in the face of injustice, but stands up and does something to change it, the system will change. And then, like Marcus, we will see that power is not something we fight for, it's something we have always had, we just need to know how to use it.